I feel as though we're getting more and more specific with each of these videos, but let's talk about, of all things, the placement of one's head while firing a musket. Now, I've seen a few instances in film, and I won't name any names here, where in a battle, right before men are about to fire their weapon, they're at the present, they're all ready, and right before they pull the trigger, they thrust their heads back like this, or at least they flinch, they look away, they close their eyes before pulling the trigger, and then, the big puff of smoke, the bang, and then the bullet goes out, and then they go back to the prime and load, ready to fire the next round. Presumably, this is to protect from, the flash in the pan, the piece of flint hitting the steel, causing the sparks, so make the gunpowder go off, goes through the touch hole, yada yada. There are other videos about how the musket itself goes off, but suffice to say, there's a little explosion right here. Presumably, they thrust their heads back, they close their eyes, they look away to protect against that little blast that's right in front of your face. But the thing is, now it sounds like it makes sense, but having fired the musket, I realized there's really no reason to do that. And if you look at the various documents, the men didn't. There is absolutely no reason to believe that the men would, before firing their piece, look away. Ultimately, there's no real reason to have to shield your face from the flash in the pan, and we have no evidence at all to suggest that the men would actually do this. Having actually fired the musket, both blanks and live, you can tell that now, it seems as though my face is awfully close to the lock, that when it goes off, it's, gonna be a great big puff of smoke, and something may, get into my eyes, I may breathe it in, even little shavings of steel may end up in my face, which wouldn't exactly be pleasant, or pieces of burning powder, which, that has actually happened before. But it's not really like, oh, a piece of burning, flick of powder hit my cheek, just brush it away. It's not really that big of a deal. It's not exactly a hot explosion or a very violent explosion. It's just sort of it's nothing that you really have to shield your face away from. And I suspect that a lot of people think that you would have to sort of shield your face, or that they would in the past, because after firing their piece, well, a bit does get in, it can get into your face, and it can be a nuisance. It is something of an instinct to just kind of flinch away. But this is largely because of this piece of brass right here. It's called a flash guard, and it is very much a modern safety device that is primarily designed to prevent the flash in the pan from going out this way towards the guy standing right next to you. Of course, the consequence of that of this added safety measure is that rather than the blast going out from the gun, it goes up, and it goes more into your face. We get a bit more of a face full of powder, I imagine, than they would have actually back in the day, when they weren't really using these on at least a military level. And while it's true that a little piece of flint or steel might, or even more burning powder after you've been firing for a long time, if you don't wash it properly afterwards, or if it's just been sitting in maybe more humid conditions, there can be little clumps of wet powder on the bottom, and then when it goes off, it'll sort of pop out, and it'll land, sometimes on your thumb, on your wrist, or something like that. Oh yeah, hand burns can be quite common firing these things, but they're not really major burns. Or it can end up on your face, or, God forbid, in your eye, and you can swipe it away. It will hurt. It's not exactly a major wound. I mean, if you got a piece of steel or flint or, like we said, powder actually in your eye, yes, that actually can be quite a big deal, but it's not a common occurrence, even with the flash guard in place, which does kind of direct it upwards. In all of my experience reenacting, I've only seen once where someone got something actually in their eye, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. You can sort of flinch at the very second, just last second, close your eyes, and that would prevent that, but even still, there isn't really a need. I've fired the thing countless times, eyes open, right down the barrel, and no problems at all. This idea, then, that entire lines of professional, hardy guys who were much tougher than me, I'm not very, look at me, we won't go into detail on that, but guys who are much tougher than me aren't going to be all of a sudden just like, oh, a little bang, oh no, we can't have the, no, get away. No, not at all. You would be looking down the barrel. Now, second reason why you don't flinch away like that right before you pull the trigger is if you look at the footage, and I guess now I have to tell you what the film is, but I already told you anyway. It doesn't matter. All right, no, moving on. If you look in the film, right before they fire, you don't see a line of men with muskets, disciplined, pointing straight forward at the enemy, aiming at the group. You see some are like this, some are like this. They're all over the place because they're not aiming the musket. And you might be asking, well, Brandon, aiming? You don't aim a musket. You're not going to hit anything. Well, that's not entirely true. Do you aim a Brown Bess musket at an individual? No, you do not. Because, you could be looking at an individual, yeah, I'm going to hit you. If you actually hit the person you're aiming at, they're having a very unlucky day. More likely, the guys next to them are the ones in danger. You're not aiming at an individual. That would also be considered murder, but we can talk about that one in another video. You're not aiming at the individual, but you are aiming at the group. You're aiming at the company or the regiment opposite of you. You're not just, present and just, you're not just holding it out there hoping that you might hit something. No, you are actually looking down. There are no sights, but you're looking down the barrel at a general group that you are attempting to hit. You can look in all sorts of drill manuals. They do have the men very purposely leaning forward and looking down as if to, they're actually trying to hit something. If a regiment comes up and they come to the present and the enemy isn't directly in front of them, they're all more, off to the side, it's not like Empire Total War. They're not just going to, aim the guns forward and there's nothing in front of me, but I was told to pull the trigger, so no, there are commands. If the group is to your left, the command will usually be incline left or right or something like that, and so you see the entire line swivel the guns. Even if not, though, something tells me that the men would be smart enough, in the heat of battle, they're not necessarily going to shout out, get ready, present, incline left, and fire. That takes a lot of time. They're just going to out, present, and then, everyone's going to be aiming at the group that's trying to kill you. That's just that's a natural reaction, and that's, they weren't dumb. They wouldn't just be firing blindly into a field of nothing if the enemy happens to be a little bit to the left. You are aiming at a regiment. If you're not aiming at an individual, you still have to look down the barrel to keep it steady, keep it straight, keep it aimed. And the third reason why it doesn't really make any sense at all to do this whole looking away to protect yourself from the flash in the pan while firing the gun is think about if you're firing in two ranks, which was very common in the American War of Independence and even in the Napoleonic Wars, at least for the British, firing in two ranks. Alright, you're like this, but you're thinking, oh, I don't want to, get a little burn on my cheek, so I'm going to thrust my head this way. Where do you think the other man's lock is? I'll sort of simulate it, if we will. When you're firing in two ranks, we're told, say there's a fellow right in front of me. You take a step forward, and you have your elbow touching the man's shoulder, so he's aware of where you are, and you lean forward over his shoulder, so that way the lock isn't really going to singe his hair or be right next to his ear. But if that's the case, it's still usually, it's around right there or so, we'll say. We'll say about. I never really can tell because I'm never looking back when we're firing in two ranks. But it's a good goal to be around in this position. Now, if you're leaning forward like this and your own lock is around right here, you're going to be absolutely fine. But if in order to protect yourself from that lock, you decide, oh, hello. See, that doesn't really make... You're still going to be in the range, if you will, the radius of the blast of his lock. You can't really escape that. Of all of the possible things that can happen to you on the battlefield, getting burned or getting injured in some way by your own pan, going off and say having some smoke or powder or whatever get into your face, that's not really a big deal. That's a very minor thing compared to, anything else that could possibly happen to you on the battlefield. Soldiers were tough guys, even militiamen. They weren't just some country dandies who came out to fight. No, they were very hardy individuals, so to say, and they're not going to flinch from a bit of really just smoke and spark. So there we have it, another case of something which seems to make sense on paper, that people would look away, but ultimately has no real sources to back it up, and doesn't really make all that much sense when you actually go out in the field and start using the weapon.